The number one lie. What do you say it is?
The number one lie women are told is that they should orgasm from penetration, which then results in this lie that we tell in bed that we orgasm that when we don't.
Welcome. Today I have with me a very special guest, Dr. Laurie Mintz. Dr. Laurie Mintz is an emeritus professor at the University of Florida, teaching human sexuality to hundreds of undergraduates yearly. She has published over 60 scholarly works and authored 2 popular press works, Becoming Cliterate, Why Orgasms, Equality Matters and How to Get It, and A Tired Woman's Guide to Passionate Sex. And she was named in 2023 one of Forbes' 50 over 50 women innovators. And I was just letting her know that her book, Becoming Cliterate, was foundational for me and for helping inform my work. And so I am super honored to be able to have her here today with me.
I am so excited to be here and so honored that my work was foundational for you. Thank you for telling me that.
I am actually, if it's okay with you, I'd like to read from the very first chapter of your book to get the interview started, because I think it'll get us going. Is that all right?
Sure.
This is before you even get into the good stuff. You feel so good. Does that feel good, baby? No, not really. You think, oh yeah, you reply. You roll your eyes because thankfully in doggy style, he can't see your face. You are so ready for it to be over. He grunts enthusiastically, breathing hard. You sense he's about to come. You start breathing hard and moaning too. Yes, harder, deeper, you scream in order to hurry him to climax. He finally finishes and asks, did you come too? Yes, it was amazing. You lie. The number one lie. What do you say it is?
The number one lie women are told is that they should orgasm from penetration, which then results in this lie that we tell in bed that we orgasm that when we don't.
What are the biggest sexual myths or lies that you see or that your work is really based on?
Yeah, and thank you for asking that, because my work is really based on correcting myths and misinformation, and there are so many. The first one we've already talked about, that women should orgasm from penetration, and I'll just give a brief truth as I tell the lies. 96% of women need clitoral external stimulation. Only 4% of women say their most reliable route to orgasm is penetration alone. Another myth is that vibrators, we're both wearing vibrator earrings, that vibrators replace partners. There's so many myths about vibrators. No, vibrators don't kiss, they don't cuddle, they don't laugh, they don't say I love you. They only provide a type of stimulation that women love, and that we have biological reasons for that. Another myth, and then I'll stop, is that if you're excited, you'll be wet. And if you're wet, it means you're excited. And a lot of times we can feel excited in our head and not lubricate, and vice versa. We can find something gross and lubricate. But the first one, like that we'll always be wet when we're excited, is not true. And that's why lube is really essential for a lot of sexual encounters.
Definitely. Let me back up just a bit, because this is what you tend to talk about a lot. And you alluded to it in what you were just talking about. We talk about the pleasure gap, that it's often referred to as the orgasm gap. And in my opinion, the orgasm gap is part of the pleasure gap.
Absolutely.
But let's start with what is the orgasm gap, and I guess the larger picture of the pleasure gap.
Yeah, the orgasm gap is the consistent finding in the research literature across 30 years that when cisgender women get it on with cisgender men, the women, and for people who don't know, cisgender just means you were identified at birth as a girl and you still identify as a woman. So and I'm just going to use the words women and men. So when women and men get it on, the women are having substantially fewer orgasms than the men. This is so clear in research across 30 years, different age groups, etc. And while it's biggest in hookup sex, the most recent study I think I read was like 55% of men always orgasm during first-time hookup versus 10% of women. It gets smaller in subsequent hookups, smaller in friends with benefits, smaller in relationships, but it never closes altogether. one doesn't have to orgasm to have a pleasurable sexual encounter. And the pressure to orgasm is really can cause some problems in and of itself. But when half the population is having substantially fewer orgasms than the rest of the population, it tells us there's a problem. And people say, oh, women like sex less. No, women are just getting less good quality sex. There was an amazing article by Connolly and Klein, and they had this metaphor. They were like, if you give half a group of people canned ravioli and the other group ravioli made by an award-winning chef, and then you ask these two groups, do you like ravioli? It's not really a good comparison, and that's what's happening with sex and women and men. The men are getting the chef-inspired ravioli. We're getting the canned ravioli. We don't like ravioli less. We're just getting worse ravioli.
No Chef Boyardee for us.
Exactly.
And now you also, as part of this research, you had the finding that women who have sexual relations with other women do not have this orgasm gap.
There's other orgasm gaps that tell us that the problem is not our bodies, it's culture and the way we do heterosexual sex. When women get it on with women, they have way more orgasms than when they get it on with men. And when women are alone, they have more orgasms than when with men. And the most striking study, this really tells it all. Bisexual women, this came out after the book, so you might not have even heard this one. Bisexual women, so who hooked up with women and men, so same woman, same body. When their first time hookup with partner was a woman, they orgasm 64% of the time. When a man, 7% of the time.
Wow. Wow. And what about in self-pleasure?
Women orgasm 95% of the time in self-pleasure. And the thing that's similar in self-pleasure and sex with another woman, there's a lot of things that are different than sex with a man, but the biggest one is a focus on external stimulation, on clitoral stimulation. The clitoris is analogous to the penis.
Yeah, that's interesting too. And yet it's developed solely as an organ for pleasure. We need to work on learning more about it. So talk to us about the vulva, about the clitoris, about the vagina. I know I have learned the word vulva. I'm 61 years old. I started this work. I never had referred to anything as other than a vagina. Now I know what a vulva is. I'm very clear. Let's talk about the clitoris and what we think about it and what it really looks like. I'd love for you to give us a bit of an anatomy lesson and a lesson in how one can pleasure the female anatomy. And I also want to start with just a quick funny story about this. There's that little model behind me of the clitoris, and I actually ordered it on Amazon. My kids were visiting. They're young adults. And the first one came broken. And I just started this work and I opened the box and I'm like, my clitoris is broken. My clitoris is broken. And the two of them looked at me like, Mom, what are you talking about? So let's explain that the clitoris is not broken.
That is so funny.
Yeah.
That is so funny. I love that. So I'm wearing a vulva necklace. I don't know if you can see it. And I have a vulva puppet to talk to you about. So the vulva, and what I'm going to do as I go through this, I'm going to tell you the parts as they're analogous to the penis too, because most people know the penis more than they know. I'm trying to get her in the camera. There we go. The penis more than the female genitals. So the outside of a woman's genitals is called the vulva, not the vagina. And the vulva has distinct parts. It has what are called outer lips, and they simply protect what's inside. And they're analogous to the sac that encloses the balls on a male. And then inside are the inner lips, and they are hairless. They're chock full of erectile tissue, and they're analogous to the shaft of the penis. Now, before I go on, I want to be real clear. Just because they're called inner and outer doesn't mean that they always are that way. Many of us have inner lips that stick out from the outer lips, or one that's bigger than the other. Those are just their names. And they're okay. So then you follow them up and they form the clitoral hood, which is analogous to the foreskin on the penis. And under the hood is the glands. And it's about the size of a pencil eraser. And there's 10,000 nerve endings in this area. It's analogous to the head of the penis, but all those nerve endings are in a small area. So, ouch, most people can't touch her directly. Above that is the mons pubis. It's where your pubic hair goes. It's a mound of fatty tissue. And the internal clitoris runs through here, explaining why a lot of women like to squeeze there, push there. And there's also the vaginal opening and the vaginal canal. And what's really interesting that many people don't know is the most touch-sensitive nerve endings are on the opening and on the inner 1/3. Not inside. There's only pressure-sensitive nerve endings. They're not touch-sensitive nerve endings. And most women need external stimulation to orgasm, and it's called the vulva. Yet we call our entire genitals a vagina, and that's what we teach. And the vagina is just a canal where penises and fingers can go in, babies can go out. But by calling this entire organ a vagina, we are linguistically erasing the parts of ourselves that give us the most pleasure. And we're calling our entire genitals by the part that's most sexually useful to men than to women themselves. So it's really important to name her, because what's named is often ignored or dismissed.
That is so interesting. And I certainly never learned anything about the clitoris, let alone was taught the anatomy. In fact, as I understand it, that the clitoris was, I don't know if you want to say discovered, but just put out in science in the early 90s. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. It was first studied with MRI technology in 2000 and a CT scan, I think, in the 90s. But there were women who were talking about it. They're unfortunately, they've been lost in history. A group of women called the Federation of Feminist Women's Health Centers. And they wrote a book in the 70s that talked about the clitoris, including the internal clitoris.
Wow.
Yeah, but it got lost. But in terms of really getting any attention to it and using modern medical imaging, it wasn't until the early 2000s.
Wow. How interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Talk a little more about the clitoris. I don't know if you have a clitoral model.
The clitoris, this is the outside area, the hood and the glands. It's the only part we can see. But there's a vast internal organ that goes through here, runs through the mons pubis, and also surrounds the vaginal canal. So when a lot of times people are stimulating, they can do this, right? They can rub circles, and that's real effective for a lot of people. They're just stimulating the hood and the glands. Some people will rub up and down, stimulating the glands in the hood and the inner lips. But other people will stimulate the inner clitoris. There was a video that went viral on TikTok saying women can orgasm from pushing on their stomach. No, it's not the stomach, it's the mons pubis. Like pushing on that can stimulate the internal clitoris or squeezing it. And also sometimes when women put their fingers between their inner lips and go up and down like this, they're stimulating the internal clitoris as well.
What's the G-spot then?
The G-spot is actually called the clitoral urethral vaginal complex. And it's an area that it can be felt through the vaginal wall, like with a toy or a come hither motion. And it includes vaginal tissue, it includes clitoral tissue, and it also includes urethral tissue. And what we know about that area is some women find it and find it pleasurable. Some women find it and don't find it pleasurable. Betty Dotson, who was an amazing feminist sex educator, said that the G-spot is setting women back because we're all looking inside our vaginas for a magic spot. And I'm not dismissing any woman. If you find it and you love it, good. Whatever you love is good. But the hype around the G-spot that everyone should be able to find it is really harmed women.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've been single for a while and dated quite a bit, and guys are always trying. They have like their one mode of operation when they get in there. It's always, I know what works for me, but I don't know what works for you. It must be me pounding my fingers into your vagina.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrible. Thank you for telling me that. So that really shows that it's set us back, because they would be a lot better off, these men, saying, how do you like me to touch you? And most of us would show them something here, not a pounding in and out.
Yeah. And what's been interesting since I've been doing this work, most of the guys that I trust, I will tell them, here, go listen to my podcast. You can learn a lot about me, what my issues are and how I like it, and what the challenges that women have, because we're not all alike. We're not like your ex-wife. We're all different.
Exactly. Yeah. Just because if you find something that works for one woman, it's not going to work for another woman. And in fact, that's explained. Every woman's genital nerves, there was a study done of corpses, and they looked at the way the genital nerves were, and every woman's genital nerves were positioned a little bit differently, which explains why women need to tell you what they want, why we need to communicate our needs.
Yeah, I was just listening to an interview you've done a little while back. You were talking about a couple where the woman needed water stimulation to have an orgasm. And then I've heard some women need to lie on their stomach, probably to stimulate that mons pubis area. Some people like anal penetration. Some people can't even imagine it in a million years. And what was interesting in my journey, and this will lead us into the next topic, is that I had issues with anorgasmia. And when I went to the sexual medicine practice, I met Dr. Marcus, and then there was a nurse practitioner, and they started asking me all these questions. And the first was, have you ever orgasmed before? And I had. And then they said, do you need clitoral stimulation? And I was like, oh, I guess so. It registered with me that when I was having intercourse, when my clitoris was being stimulated, it felt better. And then they said, have you ever tried a vibrator? And I turned 50 shades of pink, because I was, I don't know, 51, 52, and I knew about vibrators, but they took this little the bullet one out, and they said, why don't you go try this in the other room? And I was like, in the doctor's office, it was a sexual medicine place, so guys were doing it to get the fertility part of it. So I'm like, okay. And in less than 5 minutes, I was like, oh wow, you just changed my life. It really made a huge difference. And I had Dr. Marcus over at my house, invited all my girlfriends, showed them all these different vibrators. It was really life-changing for me. So we alluded to that in the very beginning, but let's talk a little bit more about vibrators, the reason that they're so helpful, and the reason why some people feel like they're really an intrusion in the bedroom as opposed to something that can really enhance.
Oh, this is like my favorite topic. I can talk about this forever. And I love that story you just told. Interrupt me, because I can go on and on about vibrators.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to join me next week for part 2. You won't want to miss it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or follow wherever you get your podcasts.